Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast mixing historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week we return to the autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, a goldsmith and adventurer who in this week's episode has begun to travel from his native Italy to France. Before he leaves the country, he accidentally, he says, murders a man. We may perhaps be certain that he murdered the man accidentally because in later sections of his book, which I've cut out because they become so repetitious, if someone crosses him, he just takes his faithful dagger, walks up to their house and paralyzes them. He says, in his own defense, that the people were cooking up a sham legal case against him. But he comes from an honor culture that's so brutal and violent that if he had just shot this guy in the face, he probably would have told us what a fantastic shot it was, what range it was, how it was with the finest gun that you've ever seen. It's his gun, he made it himself, it's better than your gun, he makes his own gunpowder, it's better than your gunpowder. He's that sort of guy. Just a couple of the little details that we have here. He's travelling with a clockmaker who is under minor holy orders as part of the Cardinal of Ferrara's suite, but he has wandered off from the rest of the group a little because his sister lives in the area and he's visiting her. While that happens, he's trying to get back his saddle pad, which is what leads to the argument. The people who fight against him use a partisan, which is a type of polearm, and a spontoon, which is a sort of short pike, so it's another sort of polearm. He manages to reload his arquebus while he's still on his horse, which is a bit tricky. The usual habit of people at the slightly later time, which we have set Magonomia in, is to carry a brace of pistols rather than a single arquebus so that you don't have to reload. This is before the invention of the cartridge, so he's doing the whole business with pouring black powder and popping in his case, a single ball, because he always fires single ball. The following recordings come to us through LibriVox by Pamela Moscato and Chris Caron, thanks to the recorders and their production teams.
I bought a new pair of stirrups, although I still hoped to regain my good pad by persuasion; and since I was very well mounted, and well armed with shirt and sleeves of mail, and carried an excellent arquebus upon my saddle bow, I was not afraid of the brutality and violence which that mad beast was said to be possessed of. I had also accustomed my young men to carry shirts of mail, and had great confidence in the Roman, who, while we were in Rome together, had never left it off, so far as I could see. Ascanio, too, although he was but a stripling, was in the habit of wearing one. Besides, as it was Good Friday, I imagined that the madnesses of madmen might be giving themselves a holiday. When we came to the Camollia gate, I at once recognized the postmaster by the indications given me, for he was blind of the left eye. Riding up to him then, and leaving my young men and companions at a little distance, I courteously addressed him: "Master of the post, if I assure you that I did not override your horse, why are you unwilling to give me back my pad and stirrups?" The reply he made was precisely as mad and brutal as had been foretold me. This roused me to exclaim: "How then? Are you not a Christian? Or do you not want upon Good Friday to force us both into a scandal?" He answered that Good Friday or the Devil's Friday was all the same to him, and that if I did not take myself away, he would fell me to the ground with a spontoon which he had taken up. Me and the arquebus I had my hand on. Upon hearing these truculent words, an old gentleman of Siena joined us. He was dressed like a citizen, and was returning from the religious functions proper to that day. It seemed that he had gathered the sense of my arguments before he came up to where we stood, and this impelled him to rebuke the postmaster with warmth, taking my side, and reprimanding the man's two sons for not doing their duty to passing strangers, so that their manners were an offence to God and a disgrace to the city of Siena. The two young fellows wagged their heads without saying a word, and withdrew inside the house. Their father, stung to fury by the scolding of that respectable gentleman, poured out a volley of abusive blasphemies, and levelled his spontoon, swearing he would murder me. When I saw him determined to do some act of bestial violence, I pointed the muzzle of my arquebus, with the object only of keeping him at a distance. Doubly enraged by this, he flung himself upon me. Though I had prepared the arquebus for my defence, I had not yet levelled it exactly at him. Indeed, it was pointed too high. It went off of itself, and the ball, striking the arch of the door and glancing backwards, wounded him in the throat, so that he fell dead to earth. Upon this, the two young men came running out; one caught up a partisan from the rack which stood there, the other seized the spontoon of his father. Springing upon my followers, the one who had the spontoon smote Pagolo the Roman first above the left nipple. The other attacked a Milanese who was in our company, and had the ways and manners of a perfect fool. This man screamed out that he had nothing in the world to do with me, and parried the point of the partisan with the little stick he held. But this availed him naught. In spite of his words and fencing, he received a flesh wound in the mouth. Messer Cherubino wore the habit of a priest, for though he was a clockmaker by trade, he held benefices of some value from the Pope. Ascanio, who was well armed, stood his ground without trying to escape, as the Milanese had done, so these two came off unhurt. I had set spurs to my horse, and while he was galloping, had charged and got my arquebus in readiness again; but now I turned back, burning with fury, and meaning to play my part this time in earnest. I thought that my young men had been killed, and was resolved to die with them. The horse had not gone many paces when I met them riding toward me, and asked if they were hurt. Ascanio answered that Pagolo was wounded to the death. Then I said, "O Pagolo, my son, did the spontoon then pierce through your armour?" "No," he replied, "for I put my shirt of mail in the valet this morning." "So then, I suppose, one wears chain mail in Rome to swagger before ladies; but where there is danger, and one wants it, one keeps it locked up in a portmanteau? You deserve what you have got, and you are now the cause of sending me back to die here too." While I was uttering these words I kept riding briskly onward, but both the young men implored me for the love of God to save myself and them, and not to rush on certain death. Just then I met Messer Cherubino and the wounded Milanese. The former cried out that no one was badly wounded; the blow given to Pagolo had only grazed the skin, but the old postmaster was stretched out dead. His sons with other folk were getting ready for attack, and we must almost certainly be cut to pieces. Accordingly, Benvenuto, since fortune has saved us from this first tempest, do not tempt her again, for things may not go so favourably a second time. To this I replied, "If you are satisfied to have it thus, so also am I." And turning to Pagolo and Ascanio, I said, "Strike spurs to your horses, and let us gallop to Staggia without stopping. There we shall be in safety." The wounded Milanese groaned out, "A pox upon our peccadilloes! The sole cause of my misfortune was that I sinned by taking a little broth this morning, having nothing else to break my fast with." In spite of the great peril we were in, we could not help laughing a little at the donkey and his silly speeches. Then we set spurs to our horses, and left Messer Cherubino and the Milanese to follow at their leisure.
While we were making our escape, the sons of the dead man ran to the Duke of Melfi, and begged for some light horsemen to catch us up and take us prisoners. The Duke, upon being informed that we were the Cardinal of Ferrara's men, refused to give them troops or leave to follow. We meanwhile arrived at Staggia, where we were in safety. There we sent for a doctor, the best who could be had in such place, and on his examining Pagolo, we discovered that the wound was only skin deep. So I felt sure that he would escape without mischief. Then he ordered dinner, and at this juncture there arrived Messer Cherubino, Milanese simpleton, who kept always muttering, "A plague upon your quarrels," and complaining that he was excommunicated because he had not been able to say a single paternoster on that holy morning. He was very ugly, and his mouth, which nature had been large, and been expanded at least 3 inches by his wound, so that with his ludicrous Milanese jargon and silly way of talking, he gave us so much matter for mirth, that instead of bemoaning our ill luck, we could not hold from laughing at every word he uttered. When the doctor wanted to sew up his wound, and had always made 3 stitches with his needle, The fellow told him to hold hard a while, since he did not want him out of malice to sew the whole mouth up. Then he took up a spoon, and said he wished to have his mouth left open enough to take that spoon in order that he might return alive to his own folk. These things he said with such odd waggings of the head, that we never stopped from laughing, and so pursued our journey mirthfully to Florence.
Your saga may vary.